It's time for another podcast by George. Straight talk, straight from the Heartland, that'll have you saying, "By George, I think he's got it." Now, here's George.
Hello, hi, how are you? And welcome back into another podcast by George. Well, it's been about a week or so since the last podcast. You know, I remember Kyle Munson was on the show and he said I'm the most prolific podcaster in the state of Iowa. And that may be true, and it's probably because of the broadcasting and radio background. You had to come up with new stories every single day. So coming up with a podcast every couple of days or few days, an audio-only format, was not a challenge, really. And doing video about, once a week probably seems like, the most logical way to go. So that's probably what we'll be doing, is a video podcast every 4 or 5 days, maybe a week at the most. I hope you like them. And speaking of video, first and foremost, right off the top, you'll see I got new merch here. This is something my wife picked out. It's a quarter zip, I think they call it. I don't know. It's a pullover. And I've had folks actually ask me whether or not they can get some stuff that I wear, including the caps. As a matter of fact, I've ordered caps for folks. On a one-off basis, they're kind of expensive. So if you're interested in one, God love you, I'll get one for cost, but they're not cheap. And the shirts and stuff, everything can be had. But I'm not ordering 50 of them to make the cost low so that I can upcharge people and make money on them. I'll just do them on a case-by-case basis for now and sell them to you at cost. So if you're interested, just message me or call the podcast line or whatever. And by the way, it's probably time to get caught up on the email bag and some of the comments and calls and stuff that I've had about recent podcasts. And first and foremost on the show today, we're going to have Jennifer Konfrst. She's an old friend of Podcast by George. She's a state legislator, 43rd District in the Iowa State House of Representatives, and Drake University journalism professor. And she's going to be on to talk about some of that stuff, but also her early support for Cory Booker. Podcast by George was at a Cory Booker rally last week or so in West Des Moines. Jennifer was there. We're going to compare notes a little bit. I've got some video to share with you from the event, and I think you'll like that. So stay tuned for that here very shortly with Jennifer Konfrst. But just to start off with what's been in the news, one of the most popular podcasts that I did, kind of a two-part series not too long ago, was on the wind turbines, the renewable energy source that Iowa has become famous for nationwide, even worldwide. We're a leader. Well, seems like anytime something good comes along, there's somebody that wants to put a major fly in the ointment, and in this time it's some residents in Madison County, down around Winterset, I think, not too far from capital city of Des Moines. They've got some wind turbines down there, and believe it or not, they've stopped it. They've put a moratorium on wind turbines down there, and I'll just read for you the story here. This is as it appeared in the Des Moines Register. The headline: Madison County okays the state's first moratorium on wind and solar development, believe it or not. So here's how it reads. Renewable energy in Iowa hit new headwinds Tuesday at Madison County Supervisors meeting as they passed the state's first moratorium on the new wind turbine installations, and Adair County leaders said they were considering capping the number of turbines in their county, effectively stopping new construction. Madison County Supervisors voted 2-1 to approve their moratorium, which also applies to new solar energy installations. It's slated to run through October 2020, but could end earlier with the passage of a new ordinance, the supervisors said. I said they'll use the time to develop a new ordinance to guide renewable energy construction. Dissenting Supervisor Phil Clifton didn't disagree with the need for a moratorium, but said he didn't think it would take a year to draw up the new ordinance. I don't know why it would. Well, the moratorium would not affect a 52-turbine wind farm Mid-American Energy has under development in the county, and the utility said it has no plans to legally challenge the moratorium. The project has already received county approval, but it's been tied up in a citizen's lawsuit that is currently under appeal. Complaining of headaches, nausea, and interrupted sleep in connection with the turbine's noise and spinning blades, Madison County residents have been battling over wind energy development, especially after the county's Board of Health passed a resolution in August calling for wind turbines to sit at least 1.5 miles away from homes. Okay, well, we discussed that pretty much at length on an earlier podcast by George. I think one resident down there was 3 miles from the nearest turbine and said she was fainting, passing out, and vomiting in her front, all kinds of stuff. I don't know. This is the kind of self-indulgent, venal, narcissistic approach to the public good that it really gets to me. I honestly, God, it reminds me of that line. You know, I'm a Star Trek. I'm an old Trekkie guy from way back. Remember that Star Trek movie where they said the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one? It was in that Star Trek movie. That's what this reminds me of. I don't know how much of a problem this is down there. But folks, if you don't like it, sell your homes, move. Mid-American, buy them out, get them out of there. We need this wind energy. And why there would be a moratorium on solar power, I can't imagine. That's not going to make anybody get dizzy or pass out or vomit in their front yard. So I don't know what that's all about. But again, as opposed to all the dirty fuel that we use and all of the deadly oil that we extract from the Middle East, sending men and women from America over there to fight and die to get it, to me, these wind turbines are something we ought to be all in on. I don't know what to say. It makes you feel bad sometimes. Makes you embarrassed to be an American after what our predecessors went through. I mean, walking across this country on foot with wagon trains and the elements that they had to fight just to homestead this great nation of ours, and the world wars that we battled through, and these people can't tolerate wind turbines. Well, anyway, enough said on that. You can revisit that podcast if you like, or if it's something that people want to continue to talk about, let me know, because I'm here. I'm all in talking about wind turbines. And briefly that's local, that's kind of parochial almost, but it's certainly Iowa interest. On the national stage, of course, Donald Trump continues to take all of the oxygen out of the room when it comes to the national headlines, and the Democratic presidential candidates are ready for their fourth debate coming up. What's interesting about that, my preferred candidate, Tulsi Gabbard, is considering not participating because of the way the DNC is determining who gets to be in the debates with polling that's a little odd to say the least, kind of legacy source polling on landlines that are preventing people from being on that stage like Tulsi Gabbard in the third debate. She is going to get on the fourth, but she's thinking, I don't know, Tulsi's got something up her sleeve. She's not going to participate in this fourth debate, maybe. Or I think she'll certainly at least call out the DNC on what they did in 2016, what they're doing. They're actually determining who the Democratic presidential candidates are because of their inner workings of their DNC committee party workings. It's bad, but you'll see that in the fourth debate here coming up in just a matter of days with Tulsi Gabbard. So, Donald Trump with his action in Syria, I just wanted to cite one tweet from Trump. He says, "The endless wars must end." And, of course, this has to do with what the Democrats need to do to get their nominee elected in 2020. Donald Trump has not fulfilled any of the promises. Forget about everything he's done wrong. He hasn't done anything good that he promised to get elected, including revamping the healthcare system, ending the endless wars. He was going to do all that, and he's tweeting out this week that, we need to do that. And I saw an Abby Martin tweet in response that was great. I'll just read it for you here. She says, "Trump tried to overthrow Maduro. He blocked ending the Yemen war, killed thousands with sanctions, quadrupled drone strikes, doubled civilian casualties. He killed more people than any other year in Afghanistan, and he increased troops in Iraq while privatizing all wars. Con artistry at its finest." That's Abby Martin. You can check her out online. She's a source that I often go to. And folks ask me, who do I read? Where do I get my news? Well, I don't go to any exotic, mysterious sources. I mean, I go beyond, the major news networks and newspapers. I read and look at those, but I go to some lesser-known folks and some names that you might want to become familiar with, that you might want to check out. Aaron Maté, a great independent journalist that was a leader on the Russiagate controversy, on debunking that. A great young journalist out there. Glenn Greenwald, folks know about Kim Iverson, who's on YouTube. She's got an outstanding in-depth perspective, particularly on foreign affairs. And Jimmy Dore, the comedian. I mean, he's a comedian, but he's kind of like Jon Stewart of yesteryear. I mean, this guy is on it. I mean, he is all over it. He gets it. He is a better source for a lot of news and information today than what you'll get with the talking heads on the major news network and networks. And as a matter of fact, he's got an offer right now, a standing offer for $1 million that he'll give to any major network talking head that explains exactly what's going on with the oil and Saudi Arabia, and with a special kind of currency that we're using over there that Saudi Arabia is paid, that has a lot to do with our own currency. I don't want to give it away. Just check out Jimmy Dore on YouTube. I think you'll like that. Well, and finally, here to wrap up before we get to Jennifer Konfrst, she's still coming up here, as to what I'm reading today. You can see right over my shoulder here, there's a little bit of that book you can see. Matt Taibbi with the Rolling Stone, one of my all-time favorites. This guy is really good. He gets it. He's all over it. And he's got a new book called Hate Incorporated. And the subtitle is Why Today's Media Makes Us Despise One Another. And I mean, you got to read that. I want to just pull out a couple of excerpts here that I think you'll like, that kind of give you the flavor of this book. And I'm not, I've just started to read it, so this is mostly in the introduction in the first few pages. But he says, Matt Taibbi about Hate Incorporated. The main theme that runs through this book is that we in the commercial media, and he's including himself, are financially incentivized to wind people up and make them angry with each other. Whereas in the old days of media, back in the days when we had 3 networks and just a couple of newspaper chains, we had exactly the opposite dynamic in media. The idea was to make the audience less wound up and actually more placid, because we were trying to reach the widest possible audience. Taibbi says now what we do is we have a divided demographic where, MSNBC goes after liberals, Fox goes after conservatives, and the easiest financial route to success is just making those groups angry with each other. And that really strikes home with me, because that was my time in the media. I mean, that's the world that I coexisted in, the 3 major networks, the 2 major newspaper chains. And what happened was, it was kind of in the middle. It was kind of, I don't know, what he would say, placid, or, they're purposely trying not to irritate people. And if you wanted to get out on the fringes, you had to go to commentators to commentate on that mainstream journalism. You had to seek it out, and they were sources that were analyzing the news of the day. Now, because of all the media outlets, 24/7 cable news and so on, they're going to sources that are solely focusing on those things. They're not commentating on them. That's their substance. That's what they're reporting. That's what they're giving us. And it's really well stated. I really like the way that he put that. So, and then another thing that you've heard on podcasts by George, and this really leapt off the pages, and I'll let you read the book. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you here, but you've heard me say probably that politics in this country, particularly as the baby boomer generation has gotten older, has become a blood sport for people that don't like football. I mean, as they've gotten old, lost their interest in competing on a personal basis because they're weary and old, maybe they never liked sports to begin with, politics really strikes me in this country as being a lot like college football, particularly the way that it used to be. Here's what Taibbi says. One of the things is that sports is a format that definitely works commercially, that the networks are familiar with. They know how to sell it. They know how to market it. And we've stolen a lot of things from how we cover sports and transplanted it onto the presidential campaign. You'll see that a lot, especially on election nights. If you watch election coverage on the cable networks, you'll see that the setup on the sets is almost like a Sunday countdown show for the NFL. You only have one analyst for one team, one analyst from another team. And then there are people who make predictions about which team is going to win. And everything becomes about the horse race, he said. Now, we borrow a lot of the language and the stylistic aspects of sports coverage for things like debates, which are just chock full of boxing metaphors from start to finish. And I think a lot of that is just a formula because it's easier to train audiences to understand politics as something that they have to root for, as opposed to trying to train them to think in a nuanced way about a very difficult subject. Now, that's Matt Taibbi talking about his new book. Those quotes actually were taken from Wisconsin Public Radio, where they were talking to him about it. But that really sums up the perspective of it. Read Hate Incorporated by Matt Taibbi. Okay, one final thing here before we leave Matt Taibbi, because he is all over it. I agree with this guy. I don't know. I feel like I found a kindred spirit with him many years ago, but he looks at these things much like I do. Not always. And like I said, if you agree with somebody 100%, you're probably not reading journalism. You're probably reading propaganda. So we don't agree on everything, but most things we do. And one thing that we certainly do is Russiagate and Ukrainegate. I just don't think there's much there. I think it's more harm than good. I know Russiagate was mostly a hoax based on the Steele dossier and a bunch of baloney that never panned out, and Robert Mueller and the team of CIA spooks currently paid for and employed by MSNBC. Yeah, John Brennan, James Clapper, those CIA spooks, those guys actually, they work for MSNBC and CNN. They get paid by those networks, and they're feeding this baloney to Rachel Maddow that keeps the libs all energized and enraged. Here's what Matt Taibbi has to say about Ukrainegate. This is worth reading. He says, I don't believe most Americans have thought through what a successful campaign to oust Donald Trump would look like. Most casual news consumers can only think of it in terms of Mike Pence becoming president. Now, you heard that, right? Yeah, I mean, what are you going to do if Pence gets in there? You think you don't like Donald Trump? Oh, baby. Well, the real problem would be the precedent of a de facto intelligence community veto over elections, using the lunatic spook world brand of politics that has dominated the last 3 years of anti-Trump agitation. CIA, FBI-backed impeachment could also be a self-fulfilling prophecy. If Donald Trump thinks he's going to be jailed upon leaving office, he'll sooner or later figure out that his only real move is to start acting like the dictator MSNBC and CNN keep insisting he is. Why give up the White House and wait to be arrested when he still has theoretical authority to send special force troops rappelling through the windows of every last Russiagate, Ukrainegate leaker? That would be the end game in a third world country, and it's where we're headed unless someone calls off this craziness. Welcome to the permanent power struggle. That nails it. Couldn't sum it up any better. The Democrats have broken their brains. Trump has busted the brains of Democrats, and they are absolutely insistent now. They're going to get him. They're going to get him, they think, on Ukrainegate. But even Nancy Pelosi knows, be careful what you wish for. Joe Biden's already finding out about it when it comes to Ukrainegate. There's a lot of Democratic tentacles involved in this corruption as well, and you may not like the way that this works out. That's the first thing. And then secondly, just because Trump threatened the status quo and the adversarial relationship between Russia and the United States that keeps the CIA and the FBI in business. He did that before he was ever elected. And the Democrats, led by Rachel Maddow, I think, you got the Fox on the right, you got Maddow on the left, led this charge with Comey and Clapper and Brennan to drum up this Russiagate garbage that Robert Mueller, another spook, found nothing there, nothing indictable, nobody with the Trump campaign indicted, nobody went down in flames, walked off in handcuffs, never happened, ain't gonna happen. They just jumped onto another horse now, and here we go with Ukrainegate, and we've only got about a year to find a Democratic candidate that can defeat Donald Trump with plans and policies and programs that the American people want, none of which the Dems were able to do in 2016. This is not an easy thing. They couldn't beat him in 2016. My God, if you can't beat Donald Trump now, when can you beat him? And that's my argument, to go left. Let's go back to 1968. Let's pick up the baton left with Bobby Kennedy in that tragic incident in that hotel kitchen in Los Angeles when he was murdered. Bobby Kennedy wanted to take this country where we should have gone and where we need to get back to. We're so far from there, we almost can't even remember it. But there's a few candidates out there, a very few, that want to start there. Bernie would be one. Tulsi Gabbard would be one. And another one, I think, is Cory Booker. That's what we're going to talk about now with our old friend. Let's welcome her back in, Jennifer Konfrst. Welcome back to a podcast by George.
Thanks. Great to talk to you.
Well, we wanted to talk about Cory Booker after that event last week, and maybe as a means of getting us into it, I want to show just a very brief video clip to start with here. And this is Cory Booker talking about something that really separates him from the pack of Democratic candidates. And he was talking about the fact that we can't just want to beat Donald Trump. He talks about common cause and purpose. And he uses the L word, the love word. And I've heard some people that are kind of even uncomfortable with that. But you got to understand what he's talking about and put this in context. And as somebody that grew up in the 60s and 70s, I mean, I get it. I mean, we're not talking smoochy stuff here. Here's Cory Booker talking about common cause and purpose.
I was just talking to Anderson Cooper out there, and pundits will say to you, well, the number one thing Democrats want in this election is someone who can just beat Donald Trump. And my response is always, no, we've got to have bigger aspirations than that. Beating Donald Trump is the floor, it's not the ceiling. Beating Donald Trump gets us out of the valley, but it doesn't get us to the mountaintop. I believe that we in this moral moment in America have to be about something greater than what we're against. The Democratic Party needs to be about something greater than partisanship. The call of this party is not to beat Republicans, it's to unite Americans in common cause and common purpose. Now this is difficult because a lot of folks say to me, Cory, you talk about all this peace and unity, and I use the word love very purposefully, unabashedly. I believe that patriotism is love of country, and you cannot love your country unless you love your fellow countrymen and women. And love is not sentimentality, it's not saccharine, it's not easy. Love is sacrifice, love is struggle. Love is us standing up for each other and fighting for each other.
So that makes me very comfortable, but it makes me understand, Jen, that you can actually fight for your country and fight for what's right, and that's what he's talking about when it comes to this love thing.
Yeah, that's what first attracted me to Cory Booker's candidacy in the beginning, was that he's got this mix of heart and fight that really represent exactly what I think our country needs right now, and that is we can't just be tough, we can't just be mean. We also have to understand that we have a responsibility to each other, and we have to do the work to make our country better. But he's not just about, love and butterflies. He's about love that has common cause and common purpose, as you said, as he said. And it's that kind of active conviction that really makes me see that this isn't just about beating a guy, because that's not how you get ahead. That's not how we catch up. That's not how we move forward. It's about beating a guy together toward a common purpose of making our country better and more united.
You were one of the early supporters. As a legislator, you came on board with Cory Booker almost right away. And I had a couple of podcasts of his early presentations. I got to be truthful with you. I thought when he first came to the state of Iowa, I thought this guy is going to be the nominee. He's certainly going to win the Iowa caucuses. I mean, he's got it all. There's nothing that the guy says or talks about that I don't like almost. But if you look at this polling that we see, and how accurate this is, I don't know. He's not at the top of the pack, but he'll be the first one to tell you that he's kind of cool with that. There's kind of a historical precedent for this stage of the game to be a lower echelon candidate.
That's right. That's right. A lot of folks who are leading in the late summer, early fall did not become the nominee. Just as President Jeb Bush or President Rick Perry, right?
Yeah.
These are folks who led early on who did not win the Iowa caucuses, and that's because Iowans don't make up their minds until January. And so they're considering a lot of different candidates right now, and Cory Booker is the second choice among a ton of candidates, and that really matters not just for when they change their minds, but also for caucus night if their first choice candidate isn't viable. And so he's doing exactly what you got to do to win the Iowa caucuses, and it's been said over and over again, which is organize, and get hot at the end. You don't want to peak too soon, and that's not just the campaign that isn't in the lead right now saying it. There's history to show that Iowans don't pay attention in a way that we are right now until January, and they don't make up their minds sometimes until they walk in the caucus door. So you got to be ready to leverage those moments and have the organizers on the ground who can really say, oh, now you're interested in Cory? Let's go. Let's sign you up and make sure you're committed. And talk to those people and be ready. And that's what they're doing right now. The campaign is building up that organizing staff so that we can be ready for that moment.
And I've talked on the podcast about the fact that Trump, and I don't think the guy's a mastermind on anything, even his use of the media. Some people give him that credit. I think he kind of gets there by default or by accident, or I don't, just honestly, I don't believe the guy knows what he's doing about hardly anything. But he does appear to be able to suck all the oxygen out of the room when it comes to politics. And so now the country is focused on Ukraine-gate. They were focused on Russia-gate, but it's all in a kind of a weird way, a focus on Donald Trump, positive or negative. And I was kind of shocked at the presentation in West Des Moines to hear a volunteer of his that's working the phone banks, but it kind of pulls me back to reality because I'm in the weeds deep on this stuff. And my God, you're an elected official, a politician, probably deeper in the weeds than I am. But this volunteer said she's working the phones, calling people about Cory Booker. And believe it or not, people tell her anyway that they don't know much about him, that they haven't hardly heard about him. Let's listen to this. Listen to her. It's kind of off mic, but listen to this comment. I thought it was very interesting.
I'm a volunteer, and I work out at the Urban Health office. I make calls, and I'm excellent, as Alex will tell you. One thing that most of the people tell me is that they don't know much about you. They haven't heard much from you. What can I do? What can you do to get your name out there, get your face out there? I
Great question.
points, and I read those points off to them. I tell them everything I know about you.
I appreciate that.
The thing about us in Iowa.
So obviously, everybody would like to be number one and be at the the forefront all the time. Cory Booker isn't, and I think it has a lot to do with the media's coverage of these Donald Trump scandals. But as you mentioned, time is running. I mean, we got to get it rolling here. We're going to have a caucus coming up in just a very few short months, and then an election in just about a year. But you're confident that this awareness obstacle that this volunteer is talking about can be overcome.
I am, and I think a lot of it is that when people meet Cory Booker, when they hear from Cory Booker, they really like what he has to say, and people walk into conversations undecided and walk out committed. And so I think that Cory's going to be coming back to the state more and more. Cory's invested 100% in Iowa, and we're going to get pretty comfortable with Cory Booker here in the state. The more people he meets, the more people really convert to hearing from him. I will tell you, the first time I heard from him, I was like, this guy is too good to be true.
Yeah.
But I can promise you, I've had the honor of talking with him behind the scenes and getting to know him a little bit, and I will tell you, he is exactly who he is on the stage. That is just who he is. And it means a lot to those of us who work for him in a way. I don't work for him in a paid way, but who go out there and advocate for him, to be able to be proud of the person we're talking about. And I think that's infectious with staff, too. So we just have to get him out in front of people more and really make sure that we're ready to leverage those moments, as I said. So it's a marathon and then a sprint, right?
Yeah.
So we're running long, and then we have to run fast at the end. And I think that if we can get him out in front of as many Iowa caucus goers as possible and we can lay the groundwork, we'll be ready.
You know him much better than I do, obviously. Let me give you my quick little thumbnail about him, why I like him, and then you can kind of fill in the gaps. But here's a guy that was a D1 college football player that came from a large population area out in the northeastern part of the United States, which is very important when it comes to politics across America, obviously. So he's well-positioned, well-suited that way. He's got this excellent educational background. The man is brilliant. If you ever speak to him, my God, having a conversation with this guy is, I mean, I don't know that I've ever talked to anybody that's as sharp-witted as this guy is. He ran into a burning building to save a woman in his neighborhood in a house fire at one point. He was the mayor of Newark, highly successful there coming out of the Great Recession, put upon us by the Republicans, as I like to remind folks. And he becomes a U.S. Senator, and now he's running for president. All the pieces of the puzzle seem to be there, for me anyway.
Yeah, and I mean, he really, literally did run into a burning building.
Yes.
I mean, all these stories are true. And one of the things that really warms my heart is that when he went into Newark, he came into an environment, to a city government, to a school district that was corrupt, right? It was infiltrated with corruption, and he came in and cleaned it up and turned that city around. And I'm not saying our whole federal government is in corruption, but there's some corruption happening in D.C., and he can go in and fix that. He can clean it up because he's got the executive experience on how to do that. So he's ready to take something that's not great right now, turn it around, and make it good, not just fix the problem. And that means a lot to me, too. Plus, he's very impressive, although I have to say, his best game ever at Stanford was against Notre Dame, and that's where my daughter goes, and he will do no end of mocking about that every time he sees her.
Yeah, and I got a close friend that plays on the Notre Dame hockey team, so I'm with you on that. Well, before we get out of here, and we don't have a lot of time, and we'll circle back with you certainly as we have in the past. Appreciate you being on the show. Obama's theme was hope, and at this, I was struck by the fact that Cory Booker, he also likes to talk about hope, but he's got his own brand of hope. Let's listen to this clip real quick, and then we'll come back.
We can't let this be a moment where we get dragged down into the darkness. Hope is the active conviction that despair will never have the last word. And I'll tell you, and I know we're hurt. I'm hurting. I'm upset. I got to answer questions like Anderson was asking me. I mean, come on. Do you think it's wrong that the President of the United States will threaten another country that do my political bidding, or I won't give you foreign aid? I mean, this is absurdity right now. But we can't let that change us or our culture. One of my favorite moments, because it was funny to me, I'm about to jump on a stage in Iowa, and it was early in the campaign. I'm about to jump up on the stage, and a big guy sees me. I don't know if you all noticed, I'm a big guy. Getting big in all the wrong places. And I'm a former tight end for Stanford, a former All-American football player. The older I get, the better I was. And the guy stops me and says, "Dude, I want you to punch Donald Trump in the face." And I don't miss a beat. Dude, that's a felony. We don't beat him by using his tactics and his terms, on fighting him on his turf. No. We beat him because in the worst of times, this country has always shown the best of character.
So there you go. That's great stuff. And it's the humor of Cory Booker. Dude, that's a felony. But he's also great at making the point that if we're going to defeat Donald Trump, he believes that we don't get down in the mud and wrestle with him. Now, there's another school of thought to this, and I've even mentioned it on the podcast, Jen, that America has changed. It's a very negative perspective. I know, looking out there, but I put it to people. I remember Barack Obama in the run-up to the 2016 election saying, "Don't worry about it." Everybody was saying there's more Democrats than there are Republicans in this land, and these types of things people won't vote for and support. We're better than that. As a people, we're smarter than that, they would tell us. Well, guess what? We got Donald Trump anyway. in 2016. So is Cory Booker right? I mean, do we take the high ground, or is politics, and you see it even on a state level here, has politics become a mud wrestling match?
You know, I think the bottom line is that Cory Booker, me, most of the people I know, don't want to get to office if that's what it takes. And so we know and we see and talk to voters every single day, and America may have changed, but Americans haven't. And I think at the end of the day, Donald Trump has done nothing to expand his base of support, nothing. And if anything, and he has lost support since he got into office. And so he's his own worst enemy in many ways with anyone outside of his core base of supporters. And so if all we do is beat him down, then we aren't giving voters anything to choose. And so why would they be inspired to come out and support someone and be for something if their only options are who I'm against? And I think that's what Cory's talking about, is that, you know, this is not, we can't let this have the last word. We can't let us make this election about who we're against. We have to make it about who we're for and who we are together. And that's why he has this quote, and it's my favorite, when he says, "Hope is the active conviction that despair will never have the last word." And that is how he runs his campaign. And I'm proud to be part of it because I think we're better than this. I know we're better than this, and I think he's going to bring that out in us.
Ah, God. I love it. That's a great... Bobby Kennedy would have said the same thing. Jennifer Konfrst is saying that, and of course, Cory Booker, the candidate that she supports. Well, we got to wrap it up. We got to get out of here. Anything to finish here that I didn't get to that I should have asked you that I didn't? Yeah, you wear many hats. I mean, you're involved in so many different things. What else should I've asked you about today?
Well, no, I'm just here to talk about Cory Booker, and I will tell you that you know, if you learn a little bit more about him, I think you're going to be moved to want to act and support him. So learn as much as you can.
Absolutely. Jennifer Konfrst. She's an Iowa State legislator, District 43, here in the great state of Iowa, a journalism professor at Drake University, and maybe most importantly, at least to me anyway, a friend of Podcast by George. Thanks for being on the show.
My pleasure.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we'll circle back. We'll come back to her here very shortly because there's all kinds of legislative news going on in the state of Iowa. And, of course, this news cycle here in the state is just going to get more intense as we approach the Iowa caucuses, and they're not that far away. But for right now, we'll wrap it up. That's going to do it. That's another podcast by George.